Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. Is the moon concave? If we look at the way the Thai language describes the phases of the moon, it can be thought of like a bowl. The ancient words used have their roots in Sanskrit and the astronomy of old. We have a bowl when it's upturned like this is ngai. So when we turn it over, we call it kwam. Ngai. Kwam. And it's interesting to see what happens to the shadow of itself when we go from it being turned upside down to going the right way up. Looks a lot like the phases of the moon. We can see here that the bowl isn't quite smoothly concave, so I fashioned a half a moon with the lid of an iced coffee cup and some tissue paper here, so we can see when we try to create shadows with the ball. Okay, we can get some shadows here. It's very rough, it's not very definitive, but when we turn this over and we get some shadow on it, it does look a lot more like the phases of the moon that we see. So this illustration of the phases of the moon shows us the waxing moon from the top left, gradually getting lighter and lighter until the full moon in the middle, and then the waning moon as the shadow creeps across again. And of course, depending on where you are viewing this from will depend which direction or which side the shadow appears to be on. It's different for people north or south or on the equator. For example, when you look at the moon on the equator coming from the east to the west, the shadow is either on the top or the bottom of the moon. If you look from somewhere else in the northern hemisphere, it will look more like this illustration. And this halfway shadow is often referred to as the terminator line, and it's quite strange because we've gone from this crescent circular shadow to almost a straight line, and then you can see that it then starts to become another curved line. And if we compare that to the waning phase, we can see that the shadow is not quite the same. It's going the other way, and we can see that the shadow in the waxing phase seems to have an out dent, but the shadow in the waning phase seems to have an indent. So this really suggests to me that we are looking at something that is concave, and it's the shadows that we see are the shadows created by its edge as it turns one way and then the other. Does this mean it's reflecting the sun? Well, let's have a look at how that might work with this candle experiment here. I've put the phases up there so you can see the similarities, and after a few tries we seem to get something very, very similar to the phases of the moon, the waxing and waning, as the concave bowl creates its own shadow. You can see that if I lift it above the light, then we get a shadow on the bottom. So this suggests that it fits the flat Earth model of having the sun and the moon pretty much on the same level. And what's also curious about this is you can see the glow from the candle extends to a certain limit on the table. This could be considered daylight for us people down on the table on the flat Earth. But of course the moon, the bowl, is still able to reflect the light from quite a distance. So this would allow us, if we were tiny people in the dark area of the table where the sun had already set for us, yet we could see the moon up in the sky, still reflecting the sunlight. Now, when it comes to the argument as to whether the moon is reflecting sunlight or producing its own light, I'd like to propose that we have a combination of the two going on. Here we can see shadows and reflection from the light, but as it passes in front of the candle, we have a translucent effect, and maybe this is what is also going on behind the moon. Its own cold light, which we've seen in various moon temperature experiments. The moon light clearly seems to be different than sunlight in several ways, its cooling effects and just the nature of the reflections that you get from moon light. So this would suggest that we have maybe light behind the moon, as well as the shadows created on the moon by this concave lip from the sunlight. Flat Earth food for thought. I hope it's nutritious. Thank you very much.